Week 4 of the NFL season once again did not disappoint, with plenty of surprises taking place, like touchdowns being on a darkness retreat for the Jets, Jared Goff throwing a literal perfect game, the Vikings nearly blowing a 28-point lead, and so much more. So let's get into the biggest storylines and surprises of the weekend right after. First up, the Saints marched into Atlanta and marched out with an L, but it came down to the wire and was a banger of a game. Quick note, there's obviously all kinds of injuries around the league, but Saints linebacker Demario Davis was out for this game with a hamstring injury, and it was worth noting because this is the first game he's missed due to an injury in his entire 13-year career, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, as far as the game goes, Rashid could have caught this ball here, but he muffed the punt and the Falcons recovered in the end zone. The Saints took the lead with 14 unanswered points, thanks to quarterback, running back, tight end hybrid Taysom Hill rushing for 2 scores, but they couldn't get out of their own way as Derek Carr's pass was tipped on the screen and the Falcons turned it into a pick 6. Despite that, they still had a chance to win this game as Alvin Kamala Harris's touchdown put them ahead 24-23 with exactly 1 minute left. Paulson Adebo had a costly PI call against him here that advanced the ball 30 yards and was enough to set up Younghoe Koo for the 58-yarder, which he drilled. No problem. So after starting 2-0 and scoring over 40 points in their first 2 games, the Saints fall to 2-2 and have averaged 19 points in the last 2 games. That's definitely a fall from grace there as they then aim to take on the Chiefs and their tough defense on Monday Night Football next week. Meanwhile, the Falcons also moved to 2-2 with the win, and both teams are now a game behind the Bucs, who bounced back from their ugly loss against Denver last week and beat the ever-loving piss out of the Eagles, who are almost unable to fly these days. In fairness to Philly, they were without A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in this game, but that doesn't explain why the defense allowed Baker Mayfield to look like prime Brett Favre out there throwing for 347 yards and 2 touchdowns plus another one on the ground on this read option. Before the game, Eagles safety and Hall of Fame trash talker C.J. Gardner-Johnson had this to say. Well, unless he was referring to the belt of Mike Evans upon his own ass, he couldn't have been more wrong. The ageless one, Mike Evans, cooked him here in one-on-one coverage for Tampa's first touchdown of the day, and he finished with 8 catches for 94 yards to go along with that touchdown. The rookie, Bucky Irving and Rachaad White each had 10 carries, and each had 49 rushing yards. However, Bucky found the end zone on this pitch to the left side on 3rd and goal, and he continues to look definitely better, more productive for sure than Rachaad White, and is already starting to take over as the lead back in Tampa. Through 4 weeks, Irving has 88 more yards on 6 less carries, though to be fair, Rachaad has been a little more effective as a pass catcher for what that's worth. Anyway, Tampa moves to 3-1, while the Eagles drop to 2-2 thanks to their pedestrian defense. That's allowing the 4th most yards per game. Speaking of defense, there was a whole lot of that in this barn burner of a game featuring the Broncos and the Jets. New York was actually 8.5-point favorites leading up to this game, and they barely put up 8.5 points themselves in 4 quarters. The weather was a little poopy, a pretty rainy day in New York, and usually in those kinds of conditions, you need to be able to run the ball. Well, they could not get anything going on the ground, rushing for just 64 yards on 23 carries, with Breece Hall looking especially bad, totaling just 4 yards on 10 attempts. That is not good. Rodgers wasn't spectacular either, though he did make some throws here and there to move the chains. He went 24 of 42 for 225 yards, but he took 5 sacks, and the Jets weren't able to score a single touchdown, having to settle for 3 field goals for all of their points. Bo Nix's stat line was honestly hilarious, especially in the first half. He went 7 of 15 for -7 passing yards and was the first QB to have multiple completions in the first half and throw for negative yards since at least 2000. That is wild. And at the conclusion of the game, Nix did end up 12 of 25 for 60 yards and 1 score that came on a busted coverage, leaving Courtland Sutton wide open in the end zone. And get this, Bo Nix had 60 yards. And look at how many receiving yards Courtland Sutton had. 60! Yeah, that's right. He was the first QB, talking about Bo Nix, in NFL history to throw for so few yards while throwing at least 25 passes and completing 12 of them. Yet somehow, some way, the Broncos weaseled their way to a win after Greg Zuerlein's potential game-winning kick sailed wide right into the rain-soaked New York stands. All right, I need to talk about a high-scoring matchup now to cleanse my palate from that disgusting game. Let's talk Packers Vikings. Jordan Love was back for the Pack after missing the last 2 games with that MCL sprain, and while he put up some big numbers in the end, he didn't look fully healthy for a lot of this game, or at least fully ready to return. It was really a tale of 2 halves in this game between these NFC North rivals. The Vikings exploded in the first half with Sam Darnold throwing 3 touchdowns, Jordan Addison rushing one in, and the defense smothering Green Bay, picking Jordan Love off twice. They got out to a 28-0 lead and were in complete control until they weren't. The Vikings' primary punt returner, Brandon Powell, he had to leave the game and was being evaluated for a concussion, so Jalen Nailor stepped in, and on his first crack at returning a punt, he lost it in the sun and muffed it, with Jordan Love then connecting with Jayden Reed on this touchdown to give the Packers some life before halftime. Love threw 3 more touchdowns in the second half, and after Sam Darnold was strip-sacked here, Tucker Kraft got in for the score to make it 28-22 Vikings. Minnesota was able to hit a field goal to go up 9, and cornerback Byron Murphy made 2 huge plays down the stretch. First, he picked off Jordan Love on this rainbow pass, then on the very next possession, he punched this ball out and the Vikings recovered. Green Bay did score a late touchdown, but the Vikings recovered the onside kick and avoided disaster, hanging on to win as they moved to 4-0. Aside from a couple of second-half turnovers, Sam Darnold played another great game, throwing for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns, as he still leads the league in passing touchdowns now with 11. So some teams, like the Vikings, have dreamlike starts to their season, but others have nightmarish starts, like the Jacksonville Jaguars. To many people's surprise, though, they were neck and neck with the Texans in Houston for the entire game on Sunday. In fact, they were up 20-17 late in the fourth quarter and had a chance to actually put this game away with a couple of first downs, but the Texans closed the door here on 3rd and 9, and they put together a perfect drive on offense, moving the ball and milking the clock all the way down to 18 seconds before C.J. Stroud hit Dare Ogunbowale for the game-winning touchdown. C.J. Stroud played his best game of the season, throwing for 345 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Nico Collins continues to be unstoppable this year. He had 12 catches on 15 targets and 1 score. He's now up to 489 receiving yards on the year, which is the most in the NFL by quite a bit. So, the Texans moved to 3-1, while the Jags are now 0-4, with head coach Doug Peterson sitting on the scalding, skin-burning hot seat. After the game, he was asked if he's considering taking over the play calling, and here's what he had to say.
For what? I thought he called a great game. We, as coaches, we can't go out there and make the plays, right? It's a two-way street. So,
well, yeah, that's a great way to earn the trust of your locker room, Doug. Blame the players for not executing the brilliant game plan the coaches put in place. Not. I know I said he's on the hot seat, but it's really more of an ejector seat, because I'm sure they can't wait to launch his bumhole out of town, which I expect to happen sooner rather than later. So Peterson may soon be gone, but Joe Flacco is backo. Okay, I don't like that one, but we're going to roll with it. Anthony Richardson left in the first quarter after taking a shot to his hip, and he actually tried to come back a few plays later. I don't know if the play call was actually a designed run, but if it was, the coaching staff should be embarrassed for calling that, with Anthony Richardson clearly not right. Anyway, after that play, he did leave for the remainder of the game, and that seemed like a big loss as the Colts were taking on the best scoring defense in the league in the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they were no match for the 39-year-old mercenary that is Joe Flacco. He came in and scored right away on this touchdown to Josh Downs, then threw another later in the fourth quarter to tight end Drew Ogletree. All in all, he finished 16 of 26 for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns, leading the Colts to a narrow win over the Steelers after the Colts D stood strong at the end, not allowing the Steelers to come back as they lose their first game of the season. On paper, it looks like you've got to blame the Steelers defense for allowing so many points, and sure, they do take some of the blame here, but when you consider the fact that both Justin Fields and George Pickens lost a fumble in this game, got to put some blame on the offense as well, even though by the conclusion of the game, both Pickens and Fields had pretty solid performances overall. But hey, here's some good news for Colts fans regarding Anthony Richardson. He was diagnosed with a hip pointer, and it is not believed to be serious, so there's the good news. But should he have to miss a game or two, they've shown they can still win games with Joe Cool at the helm. Somebody else who looks very cool in the pocket is Jayden Daniels. He picked up where he left off last week and picked apart the Cardinals defense like a rotisserie chicken. The Cardinals scored first on this Marvin Harrison touchdown, but the Commanders proceeded to outscore them 42-7. Good god the rest of the way. Jayden only threw for 1 touchdown, but aside from this 1 interception, he was on point all day, making throw after throw to move the chains and lead the offense on scoring drives. He was 26 of 30 for 233 yards, completing 85% of his passes for the second week in a row. He's the first quarterback, by the way, in NFL history to have ever accomplished this. And he's just a rookie. And it isn't like he's just throwing a bunch of checkdowns either. He's looking downfield and making aggressive throws at times. And when there isn't anything there, he's taking the checkdowns or using his legs. He used them to rush for 47 yards and a touchdown as well in this game, and appears to be running away with the Rookie of the Year award at the moment. So yeah, it's a good thing the NFL shut down that bet he and Malik Nabers had, because even though Nabers is balling out in his own right, Jayden Daniels is having one of the best rookie QB seasons we've ever seen. I know it's early, still a lot of season left, but Commanders fans have a lot to be excited about right now. Something Chiefs fans are not excited about, though, is the fact that their wide receiver 1 might very well be out for the remainder of the season due to a knee injury sustained early on in their matchup against the Chargers. More on that in a second, but this game was nearly as ugly as I would look like without a beard, with rookie running back Carson Steele fumbling on KC's first drive, and then Justin Herbert throwing this pass to Ladd McConkey for an impressive touchdown. And then on the very next drive, Mahomes threw another INT, so that's turnovers on back-to-back drives. And it was on that very play, by the way, where Mahomes friendly fired his shoulder, launching himself into Rice's leg as they both attempted to make a play on the defensive back who picked Mahomes off, and Rice had to be carted off after not being able to put any weight on his leg. This is an odd situation as well, because Adam Schefter reported that they won't know the full details of Rice's injury until next week, as the team remains uncertain of the extent of his injury. Either way, things aren't the greatest right now for KC's offense. They were already without Hollywood Brown for basically the entire year. He could probably return maybe best case scenario end of December. And then they also just lost running back Isaiah Pacheco to a broken fibula in week 2, and he's going to be out about 6 or so weeks. Then, of course, Rashee Rice is now out for an undisclosed, unforeseeable amount of time, but fear not, because Steve Spagnuolo has been doing deadlifts in rows all offseason, strengthening his back in preparation to carry this team once again. And after the quick points the Chargers scored off those 2 turnovers, they were completely shut out the rest of the game. Mahomes connected with Xavier Worthy on a 54-yard bomb, the longest air yard pass for a touchdown, I believe, of Mahomes' entire career. Then Samaje Perine got in for the other KC score of the day. However, it was really Kareem Hunt that carried the backfield after Carson Steele fumbled. He had 69 yards, nice, on 14 carries and looked really decisive and explosive, especially for a guy that hasn't played in a game since last January. So the Chiefs got the dub, and they move on to 4-0. Their offense is clearly not in sync right now, and they are losing some of their top weapons, but Mahomes comes through when he needs to, and his defense is playing some elite-level football right now, and they are still the team to beat, whether you like it or not. Something I do like is 2 top teams in the league going at it on Sunday Night Football. Something the Bills do not like is stopping Derrick Henry. The behemoth of a man took his first carry of the night for 87 yards, up the sideline for a touchdown, and in total, he finished with 199 yards and that 1 touchdown on 24 carries. He almost had a second rushing touchdown, by the way, but fumbled, and Patrick Ricard fell on it for the score. Henry now also had a receiving touchdown, and so overall, an incredible performance from Derrick Henry, and I think these last 2 weeks are exactly what the Ravens were envisioning when they signed King Henry this offseason. 30 years old or not, this man looks like he's still in prime form, and when both him and Lamar are rolling like they were on Sunday night, it's basically impossible to stop this offense. Lamar had 3 touchdowns himself, throwing for 2 and rushing for another as they steamrolled the Bills 35-10 on primetime. The Bills were having a tough time on offense, to say the least, and even though he only took 3 sacks, Josh Allen was running around for basically the entire game, avoiding pressure. It also didn't help that they decided to run this failure of a trick play that really killed the momentum of this game. Credit to the Ravens, though, who, after starting 0-2, have now won 2 consecutive games over solid opponents and have their season back on track. They play the Bengals next week, who just beat the Panthers to finally get their first win of the season. And even though Cincinnati is really struggling right now, those AFC North division matchups are always great games. Speaking of great running backs and the word struggling, though, 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey reportedly has Achilles tendonitis, and not just one, but both of his legs. And we don't know much more than that at the moment, but things aren't looking the greatest right now with an unclear timeline to return for one of the biggest weapons for San Fran's offense. Even without CMC though, they did curb stomp the Patriots, which isn't really that much of an accomplishment because I think the high school football team down the road could do that. But hey, the 49ers are now 2-2, though they face a much better team in the Cardinals in comparison to the Patriots this weekend. Next up, there were two Monday night games last night. One of them was an incredibly entertaining shootout. The other was the Dolphins against the Titans. I don't want to spend too much time on this piss-poor game because it was very ugly, but basically, here's what you need to know. Will Levis somehow threw another interception on the Titans' opening drive, literally right to the defender. You can't even make this stuff up. It's just very impressive at this point how you can continue to do this week after week. Then on their next drive, Will Levis sadly dove for the first down and injured his shoulder, so Mason Rudolph took his place for the remainder of the game. I mean, Rudolph didn't exactly light it up with his nose so bright, but he managed the game and didn't turn the ball over with Tennessee leaning on their run game to get the job done. Tyler Huntley, the newly added Tyler Huntley, and the Dolphins offense looked abysmal, totaling just 184 yards on offense the entire night. And the Titans mollywopped them 31-12 to get their first win of the year. Levis is undergoing an MRI on that shoulder, but Titans coach Brian Callahan said that he is, quote, 100% the starting quarterback when healthy. Yeah, maybe for a UFL team, but if I'm Tennessee, I'm sticking with Rudolph the red zone reindeer. As for the Dolphins, they are in some real trouble. Over the last 3 games, they've averaged 8.3 points per game, and when you total up all 4 games, they are scoring around 11 points a game, and that is last place in the league, 32nd out of 32 teams. And when you have all that offensive firepower, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Achane, Mostert, I mean, he hasn't played, but there's a lot of firepower there, and that is actually embarrassing for the Miami Dolphins. Basically, Tua cannot return soon enough, if he ever does. Now, for the game that people actually care about, the Seahawks faced the Lions in Detroit, and this game was a lot of fun to watch, lots of fireworks. Both quarterbacks were playing at a really high level. Geno Smith threw for nearly 400 yards as he connected with 10 different receivers, and Kenneth Walker was running wild in his first game back from his oblique injury. He had 80 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 12 carries. And look at this jiu-jitsu-esque broken tackle, flipping over Alex Anzalone, not once, but twice, keeping his balance and keeping it moving. Then for the Lions, Jared Goff had 292 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, and he even caught a touchdown on a perfectly placed ball from Amon-Ra St. Brown. What a throw on this trick play. On top of that, Jared Goff was 18 for 18 on the night. The guy didn't have a single incompletion, though, to be honest, he kind of did have an incompletion. It was just called back to a penalty, but still, 18 for 18 once all was said and done. A 100% completion percentage, which is unreal. In case you're wondering, that is now the NFL record for most yards and attempts without a single incompletion in a game. Kurt Warner previously held the attempts without an incompletion record when he went 10 for 10 back in 2005. But man, 18 for 18 is actually crazy. Both teams were playing at a super high level on offense, defense, questionable, but offense, lots of fun. They combined for over 900 yards with the Seahawks actually outgaining them by 127 yards. DK Metcalf had a pretty good game, but also had a costly fumble in the first quarter, and the Lions pounced on them early, taking a 14-point lead. They held on to the lead, by the way, for the entire game, even though Seattle never truly went away, keeping it interesting all throughout. Both teams are now 3-1, with Seattle sitting atop the NFC West at the moment, and the Lions sitting at second in the NFC North behind the 4-0 Vikings. And with the Seattle Seahawks, Buffalo Bills, and Pittsburgh Steelers all losing this week, that means only the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings remain undefeated. The Chiefs are not surprising. They started the power rankings week 1 at the top of the list, even though they are struggling a bit on offense right now, losing all these weapons. But the Vikings are shocking everyone right now, and we'll see if they can keep it going next week when they take on the Jets in London. I would be really surprised if they lost that game, but I guess you never know. And with that, those are the biggest storylines and surprises from what was yet another eventful week in the NFL. Let me know which game or team surprised you the most this week in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.